The desert doesn't make much noise. Out here in Buckeye, Arizona, you can hear your breath if you sit still long enough. The wind scrapes across the hangar like sandpaper, dry and slow. That morning, I was oiling the hinges on the old Cessna 210 when the radio cracked to life. Yuma Tower to all civilian airstrips, missing aircraft, last ping southeast quadrant. 2 miners on board. No comms for 45 minutes. The voice had urgency. Not panic. Not yet. But you could feel the clock ticking under it. I wiped my hands on my jeans. Thought maybe someone else would answer. Someone younger. Licensed. Ready. No one did. I walked back to the house. Pulled the jacket from the hook by the door. It still fit barely. I reached for the helmet I hadn't touched in almost 10 years. My hands didn't shake. By the time I reached the hangar again, Bobby Ellsworth was already standing there. Leaned on his cane like he had all the time in the world. "They're asking," he said. I didn't answer. Just opened the hangar and let the sun touch the Cessna's wing for the first time in months. The tower buzzed again. "If anyone reads, please advise. We have 2 children down. Medical urgency confirmed." I picked up the receiver. Voice flat. "This is Bell. Clear the tower." There was a pause. Then static. Then the voice returned to lower, measured. "Copy that. Bell, you're cleared." No one had heard me speak on a radio in nearly a decade. But today I was flying again. Before I was the quiet woman by the airstrip, I was Captain Morgan Bell. I flew C-130s for the United States Air Force. My flight hours stretched over Kandahar, Mosul, Ramadi, names that still echo in my head like coordinates I can't forget. I flew recon, evac, and supply drops, sometimes all in one day. Our missions weren't always clean. The sky was rarely still. And even when it was, the silence felt like it was waiting to shatter. I learned to listen before I spoke. To trust my gut. To memorize weather patterns like scripture. In the cockpit, everything made sense. Checklist, throttle, altitude. You had control, or you didn't. And you had to make peace with that either way. They called me Ghost. I didn't ask for the name, but I didn't mind it either. I could bring a bird down in sandstorm crosswinds or lift off on half a runway. I didn't drink much, didn't socialize off base. I flew. That was enough. Until 2013. It was a training run over Mosul. Routine. Nothing red on the board. I had a new crew member, fresh out of Elgin, name was Alvarez. Smart. Green. Joked too much when nervous. I liked him. Then the power blinked. Flight systems failed, first the auxiliary, then comms. I did what I was trained to do, ran the checklist blind, brought her down gearless on cracked tarmac outside a forward outpost. But Alvarez didn't make it. Cabin filled with smoke before I could pull him out. I carried him out anyway. The investigation ruled it mechanical failure. Gave me a medal. Said I was lucky. I didn't feel it. I turned in my wings 3 weeks later. Packed up, signed out, and left before the memorial. I didn't want the folded flag. I didn't want anyone looking at me like I was still a pilot. I drove until the roads were flat and empty, until I found Buckeye, 1 runway, no questions, and enough heat to keep my mind quiet. I bought a rundown house and kept to myself. The jacket went into a box. The medals into another. I fixed fences, tuned old truck engines, and kept a stray calico cat named Charlie fed. People in town called me Miss Bell. Thought I'd come from somewhere hard. They weren't wrong. I just never told them how hard. The thing about disappearing is it works too well. At first, Buckeye felt like the answer to a question I'd stopped asking. The desert didn't expect anything from me. It let me be quiet. It let me vanish. My neighbors didn't knock. The mail came late. And if anyone noticed that I wore the same boots every day and never drove past the town line, they didn't mention it. I bought the old house on West Araby. It came with a leaky roof and a yard full of mesquite. I fixed what I could, 1 board at a time. Never hurried. That was the best part, no one waiting on me. No one depending on me to land clean or make the right call under fire. I made money here and there. Fixed swamp coolers. Replaced rusted locks. The work came word of mouth. Call Miss Bell, people said. She won't talk much, but she'll show up. I didn't mind being the quiet one. Until I started to see how quiet turned into invisible. It began with small things. Once I tried to renew my pilot's license just to have it, not because I thought I'd ever fly again. The FAA office sent a letter saying I needed additional records. I submitted everything twice. Called. Waited. 3 months later, I got another letter. Incomplete file. No active status. Please reapply. The VA was worse. I went in for a routine evaluation. The clerk glanced at the screen, frowned. We're not seeing your service period listed under this SSN, she said. I gave her my discharge papers. She made a copy. A month later, I got a call. We're still trying to verify your record. Can you resend the documents? I did. Same result. After the second time, I stopped trying. It was easier to pay out of pocket. I didn't want to explain to another stranger that yes, I flew missions. That yes, I was decorated. That yes, someone died under my watch. Besides, by then I'd gotten used to the idea that proof didn't matter. Once I applied to be a volunteer coach at the local high school, track and field. I'd run cross country in college before the Air Force. Thought maybe it'd be good to give something back. The principal smiled through clenched teeth. Well, we appreciate your interest, but we're looking for someone with formal coaching credentials. He never asked about my background. Never read my resume. I left it on his desk anyway. I never got a call back. I told myself it didn't matter. Then there was the sheriff's deputy. I was walking home from the hardware store, toolbox in one hand, when the cruiser slowed beside me. Ma'am, you live around here? I nodded. West Airby. He squinted. This your box? I looked at the toolbox. Yes, sir. He stared a second longer than he needed to. You just looked a little out of place. That stuck with me. Out of place. I didn't argue. Just said, have a good day, deputy, and walked home. But it sat with me longer than it should have. I started parking closer to home. Avoided downtown after dark. Not because I was scared. I've been scared before. But because I knew what could happen when someone decides you don't belong and won't hear otherwise. I became small on purpose. Didn't wear the jacket anymore. Didn't mention the Air Force. When people asked what I used to do, I said I worked overseas. That usually shut the questions down. But sometimes I'd hear stories. A local veteran denied benefits. A widow told she needed more documentation. An old mechanic who used to be a Marine, now cleaning bathrooms at a gas station because nobody would hire him after his third knee surgery. We all carried our service like something we didn't know where to put. One night, at the corner bar, someone toasted to the real heroes, and a man in a football jersey said, yeah, like cops and firemen. Not like those war junkies who come back messed up. I didn't say anything. Didn't even look at him. But I finished my drink and left early. The next morning, I opened the drawer with my medals and looked at them for the first time in 5 years. There was the Air Medal. The Distinguished Flying Cross. A Purple Heart that I didn't think I deserved. None of them meant anything now. Not in Buckeye. Not in a world that forgot how to ask, what did you give up? I wasn't angry. Anger burns hot and fast. What I felt was quieter. Like erosion. A slow hollowing out of the space where you once believed in being known. And still I stayed. I didn't go looking for recognition. I didn't write letters. I didn't post on forums. I didn't tell people who I was. I just kept fixing fences. Feeding cats. Watching the planes that never took off from the old airstrip. Until the storm came. And someone knocked on my door. The storm rolled in from the west without warning. That's how desert weather is, predictable until it isn't. 1 minute, blue sky stretching clean to the horizon. The next, a thick wall of dust rising like a bruise across the land. They call it a haboob. Sounds almost gentle. It's not. It swallows light. Eats sound. Makes time feel like it's buckled under sand. That morning started like most. Coffee on the porch. Scout at my feet. A half-finished crossword and the low grumble of far-off engines from the main road. I'd just started patching the side fence when Bobby Ellsworth pulled up in his old Dodge. The engine sputtered, then cut off like it was too tired to idle. Bobby wasn't a man to waste words. Storm grounded everything west of here, he said, stepping out. Yuma got rerouted. Phoenix is locked down. Medical transport went down outside of town. 2 kids inside. Siblings. Heart condition, I heard. They need to get to LA. I wiped sweat from my brow. They're a pilot? He shook his head. Tower, send a call. No one's answering. They're looking, but the chopper's down in brush. EMTs made it through. They're stable. But they won't stay that way long. I didn't speak. Just looked past him, toward the hangar. The Cessna 210 had been sitting dormant for months. The dust clung thick to its wings. I hadn't run her hot in over a year. Battery probably dead. Oil stiff. The radios would need checking. But she was intact. Still solid. Built for low visibility and tight range. I figured I'd ask, Bobby said, voice quieter now. Didn't think you'd say yes. But I figured. I nodded once. He didn't say anything more. Just climbed back in his truck and left. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of the hangar door. The keys felt unfamiliar in my hand, but my fingers remembered the motion. The lock clicked. The hinges groaned. And the sunlight cut across the fuselage like a blessing. The Cessna looked smaller than I remembered. But steady. Familiar. I ran a fast check. Fluids. Pressure. Prop integrity. I swapped out the battery, ran a quick cycle. The hum that came alive under the panel made something shift in me. Some part one hadn't let breathe since Mosul. By the time I rolled her out into the open air, the storm edge was visible, thick, orange-tinted, creeping slow but steady across the desert floor. I pulled the jacket from the back of the hangar. Still had my old squadron patch stitched to the shoulder. I ran my hand over it, brushed off dust. It smelled like heat and time. I slipped it on. It fit. The call came again over the local band. This is Yuma Tower, broadcasting to all civilian traffic. If anyone is operational in Buckeye or surrounding regions, please respond. Medical urgency confirmed. Pediatric. ETA to critical within 90. I picked up the mic. This is Bell. I'm wheels up in 15. Clear the tower. There was a pause. Then a different voice came on, older, slower. All eyes on you, Bell. I closed the mic and walked toward the plane. 2 paramedics were already waiting on the edge of the airstrip. One held a child, maybe 7 or 8. The other, a girl, smaller, wrapped in thermal foil. Their faces were pale. One oxygen tank between them. Their chopper sat ruined off the road, rotor bent sideways like a broken limb. I nodded to the crew. We'll fit. They didn't question me. Didn't ask for credentials. They loaded the kids. Buckled them in. The older boy looked at me with eyes too calm for someone who couldn't breathe without assistance. You a pilot? He asked, voice thin. Today I am, I said. The engine roared to life on the 3rd try. The runway was rough, cracked in places, but the wind was behind me. I took off low, barely clearing the ridge line. As I climbed, the dust wall swallowed Buckeye behind me. The Cessna climbed steady even in crosswinds. My hands found the yoke like they never left it. I watched the monitors, the altimeter, the RPMs, all stable. The kids in back were silent. The boys, I stayed on mine in the mirror. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. 90 minutes to LA. That stretch of air was mine again. And somewhere over the Mojave, as the clouds began to thin and the Pacific pulled the sky open, I felt the weight lift. Not from the plane. From me. By the time I called in final approach, the tower was already waiting. Bell, you are cleared to land. Emergency crews on standby. As I touched down, the tarmac was lined with figures, EMTs, airport staff, police. Even a few press. I brought her in clean. No bounce. No skip. Just wheels down, engine soft, brakes slow and true. When I opened the cabin, the paramedics rushed in. The boy smiled at me. The girl slept through it all. I climbed out. Pulled off my helmet. Let the wind hit my face. And for the first time in a decade, people looked at me not as a stranger, but as someone who had returned. The news got there before I did. By the time I touched down in Los Angeles and handed the 2 children off to the waiting medical crew, cell phones were already out. A tower technician had filmed the Cessna lifting off into the dust storm. It wasn't flashy, just a silhouette rising against orange sky, but people watched it like it was a rescue from some movie they half remembered. And in a way, maybe it was. I didn't wait around for applause. I signed off with the airfield, filled out the incident form, and walked to the vending machine in the side terminal. I sat on the bench beside it and drank a lukewarm soda while the wind whistled against the glass. A man in a flight jacket approached, older, Vietnam-era patch on his shoulder. You Bell? He asked. I nodded. He held out his hand. Nice flying. I shook it. Didn't say anything. By the time I got back to Buckeye, the sun had set. Bobby was waiting outside the hangar with a thermos of coffee and a folding chair. He didn't ask anything. Just poured a cup, handed it over. Town's been talking, he said after a while. Video hit the internet. Local news picked it up. I didn't flinch. Just sipped the coffee and stared out across the sand. It's going national, he added. People want to know who you are. They never asked before, I said. He nodded. You gonna tell them? No. Why not? I looked at him. Because I didn't fly for a headline. I flew because someone needed help. Bobby let out a slow breath. Well, that's why it matters. The next morning, I found 2 reporters outside my fence. One from the Buckeye Sentinel. The other said she was from a podcast. I told them I wasn't interested. They asked anyway. What made you decide to fly again? What was going through your head during takeoff? Did you feel like a hero? I closed the door. That afternoon, I went to refill propane at the hardware store. When I stepped inside, the room went quiet. I felt the eyes. Not cold. Not suspicious. Just unsure. Mr. Laney, the clerk, cleared his throat. Miss Bell, you okay talking about it? No. He nodded, respectful. But the moment didn't pass. It kept growing. Local school sent an email inviting me to speak at their Veterans Day assembly. I didn't answer. A flight school 2 towns over offered a paid instructor position. I declined. Even the American Legion, which I hadn't set foot in since arriving, sent a formal invitation to their next meeting. We'd be honored if you join us, the letter said. I left it on the kitchen counter. But what I couldn't ignore were the letters. They started arriving 2 days after the video spread. Dozens, then hundreds. From strangers. From mothers thanking me for saving someone else's child when you didn't have to. From veterans who said they buried their flight jackets after coming home, but seeing you up there reminded me who I was. One came from a young girl. Crayon handwriting. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. Another from a retired mechanic in Oregon. 30 years I've been silent. Seeing you fly again made me remember the good I did. I didn't know what to do with them all. So I stacked them in a shoebox, then another. The words meant something. I just wasn't sure what yet. One evening, I returned to the hangar and found someone had painted a mural on the south-facing door. My silhouette. Flight helmet in hand. Underneath it read, "Some heroes don't speak, they act." No one signed it. But I knew it was local. Probably the art teacher at the high school or maybe one of the seniors I'd seen sketching during lunch hours. I stood there for a long time. It felt strange to see myself like that. Not because of the honor, but because they'd gotten something right. The silence. They'd painted it not as absence but as intention. A choice. I didn't speak because I had nothing to prove. I didn't fly to reclaim a title. Or for redemption. I flew because when you're called and no one else answers, you go. It's that simple. The mural changed things. People didn't stop me on the street, but they left things at the hangar. A pair of boots, worn smooth, with a note. These carried me through Kandahar. Yours carried you back. A bronze dog tag pressed into a block of cedar. For the flight you took. And the silence you kept. Even a set of plastic wings from a child's toy airplane. So you don't forget how far you flew. I kept them all. Not because I needed reminders. But because they were echoes. Of something larger than me. The town didn't name a street or build a statue. That wasn't their way. But I saw what they did. The hangar got cleaned up. A student-painted sign appeared at the entrance. Bell Field. Unofficial. No city ordinance. Just a wooden plank nailed to a post, hand-carved and honest. I never asked who put it there. Didn't need to. What mattered wasn't that people remembered my name. It was that they remembered someone was still willing to rise into a storm when others couldn't. Time passed, but the mural never faded. Even after the summer storms peeled paint from storefronts and the desert sun burned signs brittle, that silhouette stayed sharp. Helmet under one arm, face turned toward the runway. Some days I stood in front of it and tried to remember who that woman was. Other days I didn't try. I just nodded and walked past. The town never made a fuss after that. They didn't need to. The silence that once kept me hidden now held something different, respect. A kind of unspoken reverence you don't name out loud. The Cessna 210 stayed in the hangar but not grounded anymore. Every Sunday I started her up. Kept her warm. Made a few runs above the flatlands just to feel the world from up high again. It wasn't escape. It was return. A few months later, the community college called. They didn't ask me to teach a course or give a lecture. They asked if I'd sit in on a weekend safety class, just listen, maybe offer advice if I felt like it. That felt right. I showed up that Friday and stayed quiet through the morning lesson. The instructor, a Navy vet from Fallon, saw me in the back row and nodded. Said nothing. But when we broke for lunch, he handed me the floor without fanfare. "Miss Bell," he said. "You got anything to add?" I stood, walked slow to the front, and rested one hand on the edge of the table. "No one plans to be the only one left in the air," I said. "You plan for what to do when you are." That was it. They listened. I kept coming back. Every Friday. No paycheck. No roll call. Just a quiet presence in the back of the room until someone needed a story only I could tell. I taught emergency descent drills, memory checklists, cockpit comm under fire. Not because I thought I had the best way, but because I remembered what it felt like to have no one to ask. One student, a girl named Jocelyn, 17, sharp-eyed and serious, pulled me aside after her first flight test. I didn't think I could do it, she said. But I remembered what you said. That it's not about feeling ready. It's about going anyway. She passed. Later, she wrote a letter. Told me she was applying to the Air Force Academy. Said she wanted to be the kind of pilot that stayed steady when others couldn't. That letter's taped inside the hangar now. Right next to the mural. Not for me. For whoever comes next. In town, people still call me Miss Bell. But their tone changed. No longer curious or cautious. Now it's more like a greeting that carries weight. Like a name they're proud to know. Scout, my old calico, passed that winter. Lived a good stretch, 15 years. Quiet, loyal. She never missed a morning coffee with me on the porch. When I buried her under the mesquite, someone left a set of plastic wings on her grave. Didn't say who. Didn't need to. Sometimes people still ask me to speak. I still say no. Not because I don't want to, but because I've already said what matters up there in the air, where the only voice that counts is the one in your headset reminding you to trust your hands. The rest? That's for others to tell. What I see now clearer than ever is that service doesn't end with discharge papers. It doesn't hang on a wall or sit folded in a drawer. It lives in the choices you make when no one is watching. The ones that leave no record but change someone's life all the same. I didn't plan to be remembered. But when they painted that mural, when they named the hangar, when strangers left dog tags at the gate, I understood something I hadn't known before. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's the space where respect can echo. Sometimes service isn't a chapter. It's a through line. And sometimes the people we quietly help go on to lift others. That's the part that stays. The desert airfield became more than a strip of forgotten pavement. It became a place where stories shifted shape. Where an old plane flew into a dust storm, and a forgotten name became a reminder of something we all carry but rarely say. That when the call comes unexpected, unsought, undeserved, the ones who rise don't need applause. They just need space to move. And someone to believe it still matters. I never raised my hand to be remembered. I raised it because that's what we did when something needed doing. You didn't ask if it was your job. You did it. That part of me never changed, even after the uniform came off and the world moved on. People ask now what it felt like to be the one who flew. To take that call. To rise when no one else could. But it wasn't a choice made in glory. It wasn't about bravery or courage or legacy. It was instinct. Training. A kind of quiet promise I made a long time ago that I would always move when someone called for help, even if they didn't know my name. Even if they never asked twice. That promise doesn't live in medals or headlines. It lives in small things, checking the engine every Sunday. Listening to students practice radio calls. Keeping the hangar open. Leaving the porch light on. Somewhere out there, someone is sitting silent. Wearing the weight of service like a stone in their pocket. Thinking the world forgot. I see them. Because I was them. And maybe now someone else sees me too, not because I spoke, but because I moved. Because I climbed into an old bird, flew straight into a wall of sand, and came out the other side with 2 lives still breathing. That's enough. That's all I ever wanted. To remind someone, anyone, that we're still here. Still ready. Still answering. Even in silence. Even when no one thinks to ask.